All right, recording has started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dimes and Donuts podcast, your deep dive into the BAAD Owners Fantasy League. My name is Nick.
And I'm Jake.
And today, Garrett is obviously not with us. He is out of town doing whatever it is that he does, off traveling to LA, probably enjoying the beach and not hosting this podcast. So, we, as true BAAD owners, will carry on without him, except for needing his editing skills and make this whole thing happen. So, shout out in the comments if you think that Garrett's edited. All right. Anyways, today we have no trades, so we're going to hop right into the Dimes of the Week. And first up on the docket is, as per usual, quarterback, with Josh Allen, my team, the Plano Nukes, putting up 36.5 points. Jake, it's Josh Allen. Is that unexpected or what?
No, I mean, I think he's finally hitting his stride, and I think he's hitting it early too. If you're a Plano Nuke, you got to be happy about his performance the past couple.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he was my MVP last year. I think he was the number 2 highest scoring fantasy player, general, just behind Patrick Mahomes. There we go. Happy to have him back in full form. And speaking of fantasy players that consistently put up incredible points, the running back slot, Christian McCaffrey of Nuts, putting up 48.7 points.
Wow, yeah. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, he's the guy you want on your fantasy team. I mean, we're talking LaDainian Tomlinson. Like, this man will carry your team to a championship. You just have to have a couple pieces around him, nothing major, but another great performance from him. Expect to see it more going forward.
Yeah, I remember it was probably he was like a fantasy, obviously, first round pick every single year until a few years ago when he had those back-to-back sort of injury seasons. And I know that people ever since then have been kind of like, oh, it's McCaffrey injury prone, this and that. It's Christian McCaffrey. Take him. It's Christian McCaffrey. All right? Just don't think too hard about it. But anyways, hopping over to wide receivers, we have A.J. Brown of the Eagles, also known as A.J. Brown of the No Robbins, 38.5 points. No Robbins has been showing up a decent amount lately in the Dimes of the Week. A.J. Brown putting up 175 yards with 2 touchdowns on 13 targets. I mean, 13 targets is pretty insane target share. And when it comes to wide receivers, that's exactly what you're looking for. Extremely high target share in an offense that has a lot of good receiving.
Yeah, I mean, it's year 2 with the A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts duo, and they're up there with the best of them. I think, the duo together could be compared to Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson. Another great week from him. I mean, you've seen it a lot this season. I think it only gets better from here, honestly.
Yeah, 100%. Agree more. Now, moving on to tight ends, we have Cole Kmet. A little bit of a surprise, not that Cole Kmet's a bad tight end, especially not a bad fantasy tight end, but 27.6 points coming out of Cole Kmet was on the bench of Point Break. Now, did it off 2 receiving touchdowns. It's not necessarily, but Point Break having Travis Kelce, I can't say I blame them too much for having that on the bench in favor of Kelce.
No, yeah, definitely. I think Cole Kmet is honestly one of the better tight ends in the league. He probably starts in most leagues. Maybe breaking the top 5 for tight ends. But yeah, a great week from him. Unfortunate for Point Break that he was on the bench, but I mean, when you have Travis Kelce on your team, that's just how it is.
Talk about unfortunate on the bench. Why don't you go ahead and tell us who the defensive lineman dime of the week was?
And for the defensive lineman, we have none other than my defensive lineman, Khalil Mack. Unfortunately for me, I left him on the bench this week, and he's my only dime as well. Nick, do you want to tell us how many points he had?
Yeah, just a lowly 77 points, which is a league record. 77 points off of 6 sacks and 2 forced fumbles, and just to really make sure that you getting enough fantasy value and tackle.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, he's been having a slow year. I started him early on, wasn't doing it, so I decided last week put him on the bench and kept him there. But he has the potential. I mean, he is older, so can he do it every week like he know? But I mean, I think this performance shows he still has it in him. Could maybe see this one or two more times. Obviously not this high, but definitely a multi-sack game.
Yeah, that's 77 points. But equally as brutal, Nicholas Morrow of the Dallas Clovers is the linebacker dime of the week with 51 points. It's just a high-scoring bench warmer week, I guess. I mean, 51 points for Nick Morrow, 11 tackles, 3 sacks, a forced fumble. I mean, any other week, I would say that's insane. But he has to share the week with Khalil Mack.
Yeah, I mean, 51 points from any player you're going to be happy with. Coming from Nicholas Morrow, he didn't really have a strong start to the season. He didn't record any sacks until now, but man, what a breakout from him. Can we see this going forward from him? Maybe he can build off of it. He's a good player. You can watch him play. He tracks the ball. But what a performance for him. Maybe we can see this, in the upcoming week.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to really round off an incredibly high scoring defensive dime week, Harrison Smith with 50 points sitting on the bench of the Trash Fires. Now, this one kind of surprised me a little bit. I mean, I'm admittedly not purveyor of Trash Fires decision making, and it's not like Trash Fires has a history of poor starting decision making. I mean, I think that historically, especially based off last season, Trash Fires tends to start the right players. Harrison Smith, though, is a pretty big DP name to have on your bench. I guess he just had a slow start of the fantasy season, so the Trash Fires has been sitting him. But 50 points, I'm sure that he would have been very happy to have had that on his.
Yeah, what a performance. I mean, he is up there, he's probably not as good as he was, 4 years ago in his prime. But the name. I mean, he's been around for a while. Honestly, really exciting to see a performance like this from him. I think it's a big game, especially for an old player. But it definitely exciting.
All right. And with that, wrap up the Dimes of the Week, and let's hop on over to everyone's favorite segment, the Donuts. So this week, we only have one donut, and of course, they belong to the donut eaters themselves, CD's Nuts. I think they're going to start changing their names to Donut Munchers or something with how many donuts they're racking up this season already. But Jordan Addison with a fat 0 on a 58% snap participation, which is insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely unfortunate. If he was my player, I would keep playing him. I don't see a bad performance like this holding him back. He's destined for breakout. Especially playing on the team that he does. I mean, the potential's there for him. I'm keeping him in my lineup, even though he's a donut this week.
I think that there's no way that you can pull Jordan Addison, especially like you said. I mean, Vikings are a great fantasy offense in general, so that is just unfortunate. Only one target, and he wasn't able to get away with it. So I'm not really sure what was going on there. I guess just not a great game for him. But, it's fantasy. That sort of stuff happens, and that sort of stuff seems to be happening a lot more often than these nuts. Well, moving away from donuts, let's hop into the matchups of last week. So week 4, league median of 266.4, which is a massive drop from the previous week's median, in which we had a 308.27 league median. So going from sky high to rock bottom with that. But first match of the week, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so for the first matchup, we saw the Plano Nukes taking on the No Robins. Definitely surprised to see the Plano Nukes drop this one. It wasn't really even a bad week. He was 1 point below the median of the league. I think it's an unfortunate week for the Nukes. Even though they weren't able to pull it through, I'm not worried about them going forward. They're not going to keep up this league. They're definitely in a good spot right now.
Yeah, and I think No Robins has kind of been surprising people. At the start of the season, we thought they were not great. They were the 9th ranked power team, but they've been putting up back-to-back 300-plus points weeks, and I think they're trying to earn some respect. So we'll see how they end up shaking out in the power ranking. But next up this week, another, if you told me this score at the beginning of the season, a shocker. Irving Indica getting beat up by the Dallas Clovers. Irving Indica with 265.66 flat of the Dallas Clovers. Whoa, Irving Indica is in some.
Yeah, I mean, this is very unexpected. Last year going into the playoffs, Irving Indica was my favorite to win the whole league. It's just been an unfortunate offseason, unfortunate start to the season. I don't know if they can come back from this, but I think the potential could still be there. But it needs to happen soon if they want to make a run for the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean it's still early, and if you can sneak into the playoffs, anything can happen once you're there. But it is about as bad of a start as you could have asked for them. Third matchup of the week, we had the Atlanta Cicadas versus your team, the TD Lovin Tudgays. Why don't you walk us through that one?
Yeah, unfortunately for me, my team really didn't have a bad week. I'm not going to be upset, when we put up 298 points.
Right.
I mean, anything close to 300 points or above 300 points, you have to be happy with. I think it's just unfortunate that this happened to me again, where the team, had more points than me, even though I put up, close to 300 points. It's unfortunate. I'm not worried about my team, even though we lost this one. It was a good game. They just had a great week. I'm not upset about it. Good match. Ready to move forward.
And I think that's all you can really do. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't play defense in fantasy. It's not something you can correct. So if you just keep getting popped off on, you're just going to keep dropping games. Fourth matchup of the week, Trash Fires versus CD's Nuts. This one just keeps surprising me, but at a certain point, you just have to start asking yourself, if it keeps happening, is this just the way it's going to be? CD's Nuts getting away with another head-to-head win at 317 points. CD's Nuts and only 246.94 for the Trash Fires. Shocking on both ends. Trash Fires is a team that historically, I think, puts up really high points despite any max points for issues. They tend to do a very good roster selection. And CD's Nuts was a team that going into the season, we kind of talked about having a weaker team. Just keep winning.
Yeah, I mean, wow, what a surprise. I don't think anyone expected this going into the season. And honestly, what a big win for CD's Nuts. If they lose this matchup, they fall back to 4-4, and you're kind of in the middle of the pack, maybe towards a little bit of the back. But you take down one of the top dogs, and I think CD's Nuts now becomes one of those top dogs.
Yeah, 100%. I think it definitely moves them out of the underdog potential and starts to say, hey, we are here to play for the playoffs. And speaking of teams that we thought were playing for the playoffs, but it's going the wrong direction. Castle Rock Rockers versus Point Break FC. Castle Rock Rockers only putting up 239.98 points against Point Break FC, who put up 266.8. Point Break, of course, wins the matchup. They've been having a great turnaround after a shaky start. I think they're starting to do much better, starting to recover that early season. But Castle Rock Rockers, if you're them, are you starting to panic at this point?
See, if that's me and I'm sitting at 2-6, and I'm seeing other teams, still keeping up with the pack. It's a pretty tight league, and if you're sitting at 2-6, you're definitely panicking a little bit. Now, his team has great potential. He was great last year. I don't think you can drop off that far in 1 year in this league at least. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to get himself back in the mix in the next couple weeks.
All right. Well, that wraps up the matchups of the week. Let's just take a look at where we stand as a league before we hop into our personal power rankings. So at the top, still barely holding on to number one slot despite the double loss to the median and the matchup. My team, the Plano Nukes, are still sitting at 6-2. Tied record-wise with CD's Nuts in second place at 6-2 as well. I just beat them out on the points for, so I'm ahead of them in the rankings. But CD's Nuts tied record-wise with me. I mean, I didn't see that coming. I didn't expect myself necessarily to be in first, but I definitely didn't expect CD's Nuts to be up there with me. So they are doing fantastic so far.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I mean, we talked about it earlier, but CD's Nuts. I mean, I think they're here to stay. I think they'll stay in the top 4 throughout the rest of this season. They have a great team. It's surprising. But honestly, you love to see it for the league. People are dropping, people are coming up. That I think that's what you want. I mean, you always want yourself at the top, but honestly, a great start for them. Let's see if they can keep it up, though. We're still early in the season. You got to hold on to it the whole way through. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and then sitting at third is your team, Lovin Tudgays at 5-3. But you do hold the record. Well, not the record. You are the leader in points for currently. How does it feel being in third place, but the leader in?
I want to say I'm okay with it. Obviously, unfortunate, and there's nothing I can do. I'm definitely happy, to see all the points for and me being at the top of that list. I think my team's been doing well. I hope that doesn't change because I mean, it's a tight league. Anybody could, I could drop all the way down to 7 this next week. So I mean, I want to start seeing 2 wins a week. I'm happy with where I'm at now, and the points I've been putting up though.
Right. And of course, tied with you at 5-3 is the Trash Fires, who are holding on to that number 4 slot. In number 5, we have Robins with a 4-4 record. 6, Atlanta Cicadas with a 4-4 record, and Point Break FC with a 4-4 record. Kind of like what you were saying earlier, that 4-4 record being very middle of the pack. Couldn't be any more true. All those 3 teams are at this point kind of the ones battling out of those bubble slots. If you secure that 6th slot at the going into the playoffs, you're in. You have just as chance as anyone else. But man, I feel like, and we'll just have to see how it plays out, obviously, over the rest of the season. But right now, it's a really close race for just to be able to sneak into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, wow. I mean, this is, we're 4 weeks in, and everyone's still in the mix. And the middle of the pack is just so tight, and of course, it goes down, to 7, where everyone's 4-4. So you're in 7th place. You're not in the playoffs, and I think this is going to stay like this for the rest of the year. It's going to be really tight. All the teams are super competitive right now. Can't count anybody out, and you definitely can't count anyone in right now.
Right. And then coming in at 8th, the Dallas Clovers at 3-5. They've had a couple of lucky weeks, but luck is fantasy, right? At the end of the day, and so 3-5, holding the 8th position. Castle Rock Rockers in the 9th slot. What a big surprise at 2-6, and then Irving Indica at 1-7 in the 10th spot. An even bigger surprise. I mean, that's shocking. I don't even know what to say on those.
Yeah, I feel like last year these were the 2 teams. Every week you're seeing the high scorers, and it's Irving Indica and the Castle Rock Rockers. But this year it just hasn't been clicking for them. I still think it's too early to count these teams out, especially with what they were able to do last year, where they just had those weeks where, man, you're seeing 350 points from them. That could come back. They could get on a nice run, and they'd be right back into it in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. So, speaking of where they're going to be in a couple weeks and our thoughts on them outside of the standings, let's go ahead and hop into this week's power rankings.
Yeah, definitely. I'm liking what I'm seeing right now. So obviously at number 1 we have the TD Lovin Tudgays. Me and my brother's team. I've talked with him a lot. This week, even though we're 5-3, we're super happy with where the team's at. We're seeing performances all across the board. We're the points for leader in the league. So I think it's been unlucky. We haven't been winning these close games with high scores, but I mean, I'm happy overall.
Yeah, and I mean, as the points for leader, I think that definitely deserves the number 1 slot. And just the depth on is insane. I think that especially now that we're getting into bye weeks, that's where you really start to see teams sort of break away and depth pieces start to matter a lot more, and where things really start getting interesting. So we'll have to see how that starts to shake out going forward, and if that starts to shake up power rankings and standings. But as of now, I completely agree. TD Lovin Tudgays at number 1. And at number 2, my team. What a coincidence that the 2 people hosting this week are number 2, 1, and 2. Rigged.
Yeah, I mean, not surprised. We were both in the championship last year, and it seems like so far we've picked up where we left off. We've had some good weeks. We've each probably had maybe one little bit of a week, but so far, I mean, we're just seeing consistency at the top. And that's what you're going to need to stay at the top in the league.
Yeah, at the end of the day, fantasy is all about consistency. Volatility can only get you it can win you weeks, but won't get you through the playoffs. So we'll have to see how that ends up working out for some of these more volatile teams. But at the number 3 slot, moving up a spot from last week, the Trash Fires at number 3.
Yeah, man. I mean, I really like the Trash Fires. I like the owner. I like how they run their team. Even though, he had a somewhat, a high score on his bench this week, I still think he runs his team well. He always, seems to find the best players to play every week, and they're good players too. So I can see him staying up here towards the top throughout the season.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I'm ever happy to see my team playing the Trash Fires. So I think 3 is a well-deserved slot. And moving up 2 spots into the 4th position is CD's Nuts. Last week they were ranked 6, a sort of bubble team. Earlier on in the preseason, I don't think they were even going to make the playoffs according to the power rankings, but they've skyrocketed themselves all the way up to number 4. And I mean, at 6-2, at a certain point, you just got to trust what they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. I think we can agree it's not a fluke that this team's up towards the top. They're second in the standings. We're 4 weeks in, going into week 5, and if you're CD's Nuts, you're super happy. The way he's able to turn around his team, in 1 year. So hopefully, he can keep it up throughout the rest of this season. Definitely a great team. Excited for them.
Yeah, and retaining their same position, the Atlanta Cicadas at number 5. They're 4-4, middle of the pack team, and I think that they're the best of the middle of the pack teams. They were pretty good last year. I think that they have great depth on their team. I think their issue has always been just getting the right players started. But I think with how many good players they have, that means a lot. Now, I will say what's insane and what really goes to show how well this team has been built over time is that the Atlanta Cicadas, we have 10 IR slots in the league. Their IR is filled, and they still have injured players on their bench. Wow. I think when we last spoke with him, he said he had 14 IR players.
Wow. Yeah, definitely unfortunate. Hopefully, we can see those players start to come back. If you're the Cicadas, I think, you're just looking forward to, farther down the season as your guys start coming back and everyone can stay healthy. Obviously, it happens to everyone at least, one time in their fantasy career where you get hit with the injury bug. You have a lot of people out. But I still think it's early in the season. They have plenty of time for those players to come back, and they could make a push for the top 4.
And I completely agree, especially if you're holding 4-4 with that many injuries. And we're not talking like random players. I mean, Kyler Murray, like one of his quarterbacks is out, and he is wide receiver. He's starting wide receiver, starting running back. I mean, his team is decimated right now, and he's still putting up good weeks. So there's only room to go up from here. But following him and rounding out the playoff teams, no Robbins. Whoa, that's a bit of a spicy take.
Yeah, I mean, wow, no Robbins. They're in the mix. They're sitting at 5th right now in the standings total. So they've had some good weeks, but I think the question is, and why we might have them lower in the power rankings. We think they can keep this up. Obviously, last year there were some struggles down the stretch with the team. Definitely, not a bad start for them, but they need to keep it up if they want to stay in the playoff picture.
Yeah, and I think if you'll remember too, this is a team that this team had owner transfers, right? He took the current No Robbins owner, took over the team mid-season, a few weeks before the trade deadline, blew up a few key assets, got some draft capital, made some trades, really shook things up around the league, and he's sitting now with back-to-back 300-point weeks. That's pretty impressive.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's, definitely a team to look out for. It's such a tight league this year, and we're still so early on, but, we're heading in the week 5. Like, the weeks they're coming and going pretty quick now. And I feel like anyone can move up in the standings any given week. And, 2 weeks later, this might be completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. And sitting at number 7 on the power rankings, still holding it down. Point Break FC, just outside of the playoff picture. It's so early, like you just, it's so early on. And going into the season, I think this is a huge dark horse candidate for a solid, deep playoff run. I mean, 7 feels so weird to put them in, but there are just so many teams that are looking good right now, and Point Break FC is just below, just outside of that playoff.
Yeah, I mean, I think the league is starting to get really exciting. It's year 2 for all of us in this league. I mean, and I think Point Break FC is a team. Last year they might not have done well, but they got some pieces in the offseason, were able to figure some things out. They may not be able to make a run this year, but in the next couple, year or two, I think they're a candidate for a championship.
Yeah. Dropping into 8. Oh my gosh, this is such a turn of events. The Castle Rock Rockers. Now, don't get me wrong. At the 8th spot, they are the best 8 power ranked team of all time. The issue that I personally have with the Rockers, and Jake and I were talking about this a little bit pre-show when we were making these rankings, is the volatility of the team makes it very hard to win on a consistent basis. They're very defense heavy, and in my opinion, I think that makes it difficult to win your head-to-heads consistently. And if you're not winning head-to-heads consistently and you're missing league medians, it's hard to make the playoffs. You can have incredible blowout weeks like the Castle Rock Rockers do. They hold the vast majority of the point scoring records in our league. But at this point, they've had 2 very bad weeks, and it's only week 4. I mean, 50% of your games not doing well at all, causing you to now sit at 2-6 going into week 5. I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, I'm playing the Rockers this week, and I'll be honest, I'm nervous. The team was very good last year. Any given week, they were putting up 350 points. I think it's an unfortunate start. Like you said, it's still early for them. I'm not counting them out yet. I think the team, has just had a slow start. But if pieces start falling, together, and some guys are able to put in good weeks, I think they could work their way back into the playoffs, no problem.
And I absolutely agree with that. I think that if there's any team outside of the playoffs right now that can end up making a huge run and recovering, it's them. Now, sitting in the 9th slot, back to the 9th slot after briefly revisiting their very familiar place at 10, the Dallas Clovers, everyone's favorite team, just really holding it down there at the bottom of the league. Man, I mean, they're sitting at 3-5. They have the least points for by a pretty decent margin. Oh man, I mean, for what it's worth, they have a lot of promising rookie talent on their team. Obviously, last year they blew up a ton of their league, traded away some assets for a ton of draft capital, drafted in this past rookie draft a lot of new players, and they just need time for them to develop.
Yeah, I mean, these rookies, they have potential too, and they've shown it. I actually lost to the Clovers. They beat me in the head-to-head matchup. I think they had around 320 points, and the rookies had big weeks. Obviously, they're not doing it on a consistent basis, and that's why they might be lower in the power rankings and in the standings. But I mean, when in the next few years, when these guys are getting better and they become more veteran players, I mean, this is a team to watch out for. I think this year's just probably won't be it for them, unless something crazy happens, which is possible. You never know.
Right.
But yeah, I just think this year might not be their year, but definitely in the next couple of years they're going to be a powerhouse.
And absolutely shocking everyone, the Irving Indica in the 10th slot. What a fall from grace, being some people's absolute favorites to win league last season to now being in some serious panic mode. I don't know. I think I'd be pretty nervous if I was them. They have a lot of talent on the team. They have Lamar Jackson, Justin Jefferson, DeAndre Hopkins, but Chris Jones, Hassan Red. I mean, they've got star power. Minka Fitzpatrick, who's a fantasy demon. But it's just not clicking, like you said. And there's just not much to say about a 1-7 start.
Yeah, I mean, what a surprise. Like I said earlier, I mean, they were my favorites going into the playoffs last year to win the whole thing. I mean, I think everyone's shocked by, the start they've had. I mean, it's 1-7, so I mean, is there time to come back? Yes, but I think the time is now. Otherwise, they might start looking to sell. Their team is getting older. There's a couple older people on there. I mean, Lamar Jackson's a running quarterback. He's pretty good, but with those hits, you do have a little bit of concern going forward with him in the next few seasons. So it may be time to sell for the Indica.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just have to see how things shake up going forward. Week 5 is, of course, the start of the bye week. So now it's when depth pieces start to matter. You're not able to just play your best players every week and start getting pretty serious. Start getting into upset territory as bye weeks start matching up funny. But we'll just have to see how that ends up shaking out. So that will be it for today's episode of the Dimes and Donuts podcast. Thank you all for listening. Of course, remember to like the video and subscribe if you enjoyed. If you didn't, feel free to leave a comment telling us about how much you didn't enjoy it, because that helps the algorithm too. So thank you so much. Jake, any last words?
No, I mean, I'm excited. This next couple of weeks with the bye weeks coming up, man. The top is, they're gonna rise to the top, and then some people might start to fall off. You could see someone sneak in. So next couple of weeks will definitely be exciting.
All right, see y'all.